Was it sexual? Was he after you physically?
Yes, but that didn't happen until we were almost finished with Marne. And you know, it really was so upsetting to me that he would pull that card.
Are you trying to kill her? A doctor shouted at Alfred Hitchcock during the filming of The Birds. But the real horror happened behind closed doors. From secretly going into her wardrobe to having her followed by private investigators, Hitchcock's obsession went far beyond directing. By the time she escaped his control, her promising career was in ruins. Today, we reveal why Tippi Hedren never forgave the man who turned her Hollywood dream into a nightmare. Tippi Hedren was born on January 19, 1930, in a small town called New Ulm, Minnesota. It was a tough time. The Great Depression had just started, and most families, including hers, were struggling to get by. Her parents, Bernard and Dorothea, ran a small general store in the nearby town of Lafayette. Life wasn't easy, but even as a little girl, Tippi showed strength and determination. Her father nicknamed her Tippi, which means little girl in Sweden, a nod to their family's Scandinavian roots. That nickname would later become famous around the world. Growing up in rural Minnesota during the 1930s and 1940s wasn't glamorous. The hard life of farming and the shadow of poverty were all she knew. But Tippi found joy in nature and developed a strong work ethic. At just 10 years old, she had her first taste of performing when she appeared as an extra in a small local theater production. It was a tiny moment, but it planted the idea of a future she couldn't yet imagine. On her 20th birthday in 1950, Tippi made a brave decision. She packed her bags, took her savings of $500, and left everything she knew behind. She was headed to New York City to become a model. The city was overwhelming, and the start was rough. She shared a small apartment with 3 other aspiring models and lived on cheap canned soup to get by. Tippi spent her days walking from one modeling agency to another, clutching her portfolio and hoping for a break. But the city wasn't kind. In her first month, she was rejected 387 times. Still, she didn't give up. Then, one day, while grabbing a quick coffee to recharge, her luck changed. Eileen Ford, the co-founder of the famous Ford modeling agency, noticed her. Impressed by Tippi's elegance, Ford invited her for an interview. By March 1950, just 2 months after arriving, Tippi signed with the agency. From that moment, her life transformed. Ford helped refine her image, enrolling her in speech and etiquette classes to polish her presentation. Tippi worked tirelessly, practicing poses and expressions in front of the mirror for hours in her small apartment. Her hard work paid off. Within 6 months, she landed her first major modeling job, earning $500 in a single day, a fortune at the time. By 1952, Tippi was gracing the covers of major magazines. Her first big breakthrough came with glamour, but her defining moment was landing the cover of Life magazine in 1953. For that shoot, she posed in heavy winter clothing under the blazing summer sun. Despite the heat, the results were stunning, and the cover sold over 5.5 million copies. It made her a star. Tippi's fame quickly spread beyond the U.S., and she became a global sensation, appearing on the covers of Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Elle. By 1955, she was earning $1,000 a day, a groundbreaking achievement for any model at the time. As television commercials became the next big thing, Tippi transitioned effortlessly. Her first major TV ad for Seago diet drinks aired in 1961 and even caught the eye of Alfred Hitchcock. But her television career had started earlier, with campaigns for brands like Max Factor and Coca-Cola. In 1956, she became the face of Max Factor and starred in some of the first color commercials ever made. These ads showcased her flawless features, boosting her fame even more. In one memorable ad for Winston cigarettes, Tippi learned to smoke specifically for the shoot, practicing with herbal cigarettes until she got it right. On October 13, 1961, Tippi Hedren's life changed in a way she never expected. She appeared in a commercial for Seago, a popular diet drink at the time. The ad showed her walking down the street, looking elegant with her blonde hair perfectly styled. A man whistled as she passed, and she turned and smiled. It was a short, simple commercial, but it caught the attention of one very important person, Alfred Hitchcock. The famous director saw it on the Today Show and was instantly interested. He asked his team, "Who's that girl?" That question started a chain of events that would bring Hedren into Hollywood and into Hitchcock's world. Later that same day, Hedren got a strange phone call from an agent at MCA Universal. The agent told her that a producer wanted to meet her, but wouldn't say who it was. Curious, Hedren agreed to visit Universal Studios. A few days later, on October 17th, she sat down with Lou Wasserman, the head of the studio. To her surprise, he offered her a 7-year contract. She didn't know it yet, but the contract was for Alfred Hitchcock. Thinking of her young daughter and the security this opportunity could bring, she quickly signed. Only after the papers were signed did she meet Hitchcock. He had planned everything so carefully that she didn't even know what she was walking into until it was too late to say no. Once Hedren was officially under contract, Hitchcock wanted to see if she could handle being in movies. He organized a screen test, but it wasn't just any test. It was the most expensive one Hollywood had ever seen. Hitchcock spent $25,000, a huge amount in 1961, to make it perfect. For 3 days, Hedren acted in scenes from his earlier films like Rebecca and Notorious. To help her, Hitchcock flew in Martin Balsam, a well-known actor from Psycho. Hedren had no acting experience, but she worked hard to play the complex characters. Hitchcock directed every part of the test himself, carefully shaping her performance. He wasn't just testing her skills, he was trying to mold her into his perfect leading lady. A few weeks later, at a lunch in a fancy restaurant, Hitchcock finally told her she would star in The Birds. As a special gesture, he gave her a golden pin shaped like 3 birds in flight, symbolizing her big role. The news stunned Hollywood. An unknown model with no acting experience as the lead in a Hitchcock film? People couldn't believe it. Even Tippi was confused. She said, "I was so stunned. It never occurred to me that I would be given a leading role in a major motion picture. I had great big tears in my eyes." Hitchcock took a hands-on approach to preparing Hedren for her acting debut. Between January and March 1962, he oversaw every detail of her transformation from model to actress. He arranged for her to attend acting lessons, observe animal behavior at zoos, and even take art history and wine appreciation courses to refine her poise. Costume designer Edith Head created a custom wardrobe not just for the film, but for Hedren's public appearances. Hitchcock insisted that her name be styled as Tippi in all promotional material, believing it added an air of mystery. He even controlled aspects of her diet and exercise routine to craft her image to perfection. Filming for The Birds began on March 5, 1962, and lasted until July 10th. It was an intense and grueling process, especially for Hedren. Tippi Hedren spent 6 long months filming with barely any time to rest. She only got 1 afternoon off each week, and at first, the work felt exciting. Hitchcock, the director, was impressed and even told reporters she was incredible. "She's already showing the highs and lows of terror," he said. But as the filming went on, things took a much harder turn. The bird attack scene in the second-floor bedroom became a nightmare for Hedren. Before shooting began, she asked Hitchcock why her character would even go upstairs, knowing it was dangerous. His only answer? "Because I tell you to." She was told mechanical birds would be used, so she went along with it. But when the cameras rolled, she was in for a shock. For 5 days straight, live birds were thrown at her. Prop men, wearing thick gloves, hurled gulls, crows, and ravens at her face and body. Their beaks were tied shut with rubber bands, but the chaos was real. Hedren was terrified and exhausted, and during one of the takes, a bird scratched her cheek, missing her eye by inches. That was the breaking point. She sat down on set, crying, completely worn out. A doctor came to check on her and ordered a week of rest. Hitchcock tried to argue, saying they needed her to finish the scene, but the doctor cut him off. "Are you trying to kill her?" Reluctantly, Hitchcock agreed to pause. Hedren later admitted that this week was one of the hardest of her life, and even Hitchcock seemed shaken by how intense it had been. Other scenes were equally challenging. During the phone booth attack, the supposedly shatterproof glass broke, covering Hedren in shards. It took hours for makeup artists to remove the tiny fragments from her face. Over 3,200 birds, some trained for months, were used during production. The physical and emotional toll on Hedren Hedren was immense, yet she delivered a remarkable performance. When The Birds premiered on March 28, 1963, it became an instant sensation. Despite mixed reviews, it was a commercial hit, earning $11.4 million in the U.S. alone. Hedren's performance earned her widespread praise, and she won the Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer on March 8, 1964. The film's success didn't end there. It was screened at the Cannes Film Festival and later earned a spot in the U.S. National Film Registry for its cultural significance. After The Birds, Alfred offered Tippi another role in a movie called Marne. The role of Marne was tough. It was about a woman with deep emotional scars and complicated feelings. Hedren knew this was a big chance for her and worked hard to prepare. She even spent time with psychologists to understand her character's struggles. The film started production in late 1963 with a large $3 million budget. Hedren was paid $600 a week, which seemed small for such an important role. Marne was also the end of some important partnerships for Hitchcock. It was his last movie with his trusted cinematographer, editor, and composer. This gave the film an air of finality, but what was happening behind the scenes was far more dramatic. As filming began, Hitchcock's behavior toward Hedren became disturbing. He wanted to control everything about her life. He decided what she wore, what she ate, and even how her name should appear in credits. He insisted it be written as Tippi in quotation marks. Hitchcock also made sure his driver passed by her house often, as if to remind her he was always watching. On set, he would stare at her, which Hedren described as creepy and unsettling. Things escalated when Hitchcock made an inappropriate move on her in her trailer, crossing a line that shattered their working relationship. Hitchcock also pushed Hedren to her limits on set. He made her repeat emotionally painful scenes over and over to get the reaction he wanted, regardless of how much it hurt her. This echoed what she went through during The Birds, where live birds were used to scare her for real. Despite all this, Hedren stayed focused on her work. She poured her own feelings of frustration and entrapment into her performance as Marne, who was also trapped and controlled by men in her life. When the movie came out in 1964, critics didn't know what to make of it. Some felt the themes were too dark or uncomfortable, and the film didn't make a huge splash at the box office. Over time, however, people began to see it as one of Hitchcock's most complicated and interesting films. Hedren's acting also got more appreciation later. Critics came to understand how much depth and emotion she brought to the role, especially considering the pressure she was under. The real-life parallels between her struggles with Hitchcock and her character's struggles in the story gave the film even more meaning. Unfortunately, Marne also marked the end of Hedren's work with Hitchcock, but it wasn't the immediate decision. During the filming of The Birds in 1962, Hitchcock's behavior became disturbing. One day, in the back of a limousine, he lunged at her, trying to kiss her. She described the incident as awful, something she wished she could erase from her memory. His obsession grew worse during the production of Marne in 1964. He had a private door installed between his office and her dressing room, violating her privacy. On one horrifying occasion, he entered her dressing room and grabbed her in a way she later described as sexual, perverse, and ugly. Hitchcock even went as far as spying on her outside the set. He had her followed, analyzed her handwriting, and listened in on her private phone calls. The constant surveillance made her feel trapped and helpless, completely draining the excitement of being a rising Hollywood star. Hitchcock's obsession extended beyond the professional. He tried to control her personal life, dictating what she ate and how she dressed, even when she wasn't filming. Sometimes he left specific food outside her door, blurring the line between professional guidance and personal intrusion. On set, his behavior became unbearable. He stared at her constantly, creating a suffocating environment. He repeatedly asked her to join him for private meals and drinks, pushing boundaries in ways that made her deeply uncomfortable. He even hired private investigators to follow her and report on her daily activities. These actions made her feel like she was under constant watch, unable to escape his controlling grip. By 1964, Hedren couldn't take it anymore. During the filming of Marne, she confronted Hitchcock directly in his office, where many of his inappropriate advances had occurred. She told him she wanted out of their professional arrangement. Hitchcock tried to manipulate her by bringing up her family, saying her daughter needed care and her parents were aging. When that didn't work, he turned to threats. "I'll ruin your career," he warned her. Despite knowing the risks, Hedren stood her ground. She refused to tolerate his behavior any longer, even though it meant putting her career in jeopardy. True to his word, Hitchcock worked hard to sabotage her career. He had her under a 7-year contract, which meant she couldn't work with anyone else without his permission, but he wouldn't let her take any roles. For 2 years, from 1964 to 1966, Hedren was stuck. She was paid $600 a week to do nothing while her career sat in limbo. Hitchcock didn't stop there. Many famous directors, including Francois Truffaut, wanted to cast her. Every time, Hitchcock blocked them by simply saying she isn't available. He even stopped her from accepting an award in New York for Most Promising New Star. With no other options, Hedren turned to television. It wasn't what she had planned for her career, but she took it on with the same determination. Her first TV role was in Kraft Suspense Theater in 1965. Over the next few years, she appeared in several shows like Run for Your Life and The Courtship of Eddie's Father. These roles helped her keep going, even though they weren't the big movie roles she had once dreamed of. One of the most ironic moments of her career came in 1985. She appeared in an episode of the new Alfred Hitchcock Presents. In the episode, she played a waitress who scolded a customer, who happened to be played by her own daughter, Melanie Griffith. It was a strange but powerful moment that showed her resilience, even after everything Hitchcock had put her through. Hedren also wanted to show people she wasn't just a serious actress tied to Hitchcock's films. In 1994, she guest starred in the comedy series Dream On. She later said it was refreshing to show her funny side, as many people only saw her as a dramatic actress. This role reminded everyone of her versatility and her strength to keep moving forward despite all the setbacks. But one of her big opportunities came when Charlie Chaplin cast her in his last film, A Countess from Hong Kong, 1967. Chaplin himself offered her the role of Marlon Brando's estranged wife, but there was a catch. She had to accept it without even reading the script. Tippi, excited to work with someone as famous as Chaplin, said yes. But when she got to England for filming, she found out her part was very small, almost like a cameo. Even though it wasn't what she expected, she stayed in the movie because it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to work with him. Working with Chaplin turned out to be completely different from her time with Hitchcock. Chaplin didn't control her in the same way. Instead, he acted out all the characters himself, showing the actors exactly how he wanted the scenes to look. While this frustrated some actors, like Marlon Brando, Tippi found it fun and fascinating. She called it pure delight to see Chaplin perform. The movie didn't do well in theaters, but for Tippi, it was still a valuable experience. She got to work with big stars like Marlon Brando and Sophia Loren, proving that she could hold her own even after Hitchcock tried to damage her career. Tippi Hedren's passion for animals started unexpectedly in 1969. She was in Mozambique filming Satan's Harvest when she and her husband Noel Marshall found an abandoned house full of lions. This moment changed her life. She became deeply concerned about the future of big cats. Soon, she and Noel began rescuing lions, tigers, and cheetahs from zoos, circuses, and animal control. By the 1970s, their home in California was full of over 150 big cats. People thought this was strange, and it wasn't long before local authorities told them they had to move. They bought a larger ranch in Acton, California, to give the animals more space. In 1983, Tippi founded the Roar Foundation and opened the Shambhala Preserve. This 80-acre sanctuary became a safe place for exotic animals that were abandoned or abused. It even became the home of 2 Bengal tigers owned by Michael Jackson after he closed his Neverland Ranch Zoo. Tippi also fought hard to change laws. She wanted to stop people from breeding and owning big cats for profit. In 2012, she went to Congress to support a new law that would protect these animals. She faced threats for her activism, but never gave up. Her love for big cats inspired the movie Roar. The idea came from the lions she had seen in Mozambique. She and Noel wanted to make a film that showed how beautiful and powerful these animals were, while raising awareness about their protection. Noel wrote a story about a naturalist who lives with wild animals. The chaos begins when his family comes to visit. Filming started in 1976, mostly on their ranch, which they made to look like an African savanna. The cast included Tippi, her daughter Melanie Griffith, Noel, and his two sons. What made the movie unique and dangerous was that it used real, untrained animals. Lions, tigers, and leopards roamed freely on set. Then, disaster struck. In 1978, a massive flood destroyed much of the set and killed 3 lions. The budget, which was small at first, exploded to $17 million. Tippi and Noel sold their home to keep the project going. But when the film finally came out in 1981, it only made $2 million. The failure was heartbreaking and led to their divorce a year later. Even though Roar was a failure, it showed how much Tippi cared about animals. Her work didn't stop after the movie. She continued to fight for big cats and provided a safe home for them at her sanctuary. Even as she got older, she kept taking on interesting roles. When she was 74, she played a small but memorable part in the comedy I Heart Huckabees, acting as Jude Law's character's mother. Around the same time, she appeared in the science fiction show The 4400, where she played an older version of a character dealing with themes of time travel and aging. At 76, she surprised audiences again by playing a tough, ruthless fashion mogul in the TV drama Fashion House, showing that age didn't slow her down. She carried a big role across 40 episodes, proving her commitment and skill. Later in her life, she even acted in horror films, despite her difficult experience filming The Birds. At 82, she appeared in the psychological thriller Free Samples, and a year later, she had a cameo in the horror movie Return to Babylon. These roles showed her bravery and dedication to acting, even as she entered her 80s. Tippi's strength and resilience left a deep mark on her family. Her daughter, Melanie Griffith, grew up around movie sets, including the dangerous shoot of Roar. During that film, Melanie was attacked by a lion at age 14, leaving her with injuries that needed facial surgery. Despite this, Melanie went on to become a successful actress and always admired her mother's strength. Melanie often said that her mother's courage, especially dealing with Alfred Hitchcock's abusive behavior, taught her what to avoid in her own life. This influence didn't stop with Melanie. Tippi's granddaughter, Dakota Johnson, also found inspiration in her. Dakota, who became famous for her role in 50 Shades of Grey, often talked about how her grandmother and mother shaped her career. Even as Tippi got older, her passion for wildlife left an impression on her family. In 2022, Dakota shared that her grandmother, at 92, was still caring for 20 big cats, showing the same passion and determination she always had. Tippi Hedren was one of the first people to openly talk about her experiences with Alfred Hitchcock. She spoke out long before this #MeToo movement even existed. In her 2016 memoir, Tippi A Memoir, she shared the difficult truth about working with Hitchcock during the 1960s. She described how he treated her, including one moment when he allegedly grabbed her in his office. It was shocking, but it wasn't a new story for Hollywood. Hedren's account showed that this kind of behavior had been going on for decades, hidden and ignored. Interestingly, Hedren's stance on discussing her experiences has evolved over time. In more recent interviews, she has expressed fatigue with constantly being asked about Hitchcock's behavior. In a 2016 interview, she stated, "I am sick and tired of answering the question about Alfred Hitchcock making advances upon me. People love to read about things like that. They love it. For those of us who have had to live it, I am tired of talking about it." This sentiment reflects the complex emotions many survivors grapple with when their traumatic experiences become public knowledge. Tippi Hedren has left an unforgettable mark in 2 very different worlds, Hollywood and animal rights advocacy. Her achievements as an actress and her dedication to protecting animals have earned her recognition even in her later years. On January 30th, 2003, she received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, located at 7060 Hollywood Boulevard. This honor came 40 years after her famous performance in The Birds, showing how her work in cinema continues to be celebrated decades later. Her contributions to animal welfare are just as noteworthy. On December 8, 2002, she was presented with a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Humane Society of the United States. This award acknowledged her incredible work with big cats, including the founding of the Shambhala Preserve in 1983. It also highlighted her efforts to push for laws that protect these animals from harm. One of Tippi's most significant victories came much later, on December 20th, 2022. At the age of 92, she witnessed the signing of the Big Cat Public Safety Act by President Joe Biden. This law, which she had fought for over 2 decades, made it illegal to privately own big cats and banned exploitative cub petting operations. Seeing this law pass was the culmination of a lifetime of dedication to animal welfare, marking a huge step forward for big cat protection in the United States. Tippi's rare ability to blend her Hollywood fame with her passion for animals made her advocacy even more impactful. In 2017, at 87 years old, she appeared in a PETA campaign against the use of wild animals in movies. The ad recreated a scene from The Birds, but instead of live birds, CGI was used to show how technology can replace the need for real animals on set. This campaign reflected her enduring commitment to ethical treatment of animals and her willingness to adapt to modern solutions.